Howdy folks, welcome to 20th Century Adventures. I'm Nathan Logston, and this is my good friend Josh Wilson. Some of you may follow him on Instagram under Exploring Victorian. Today we are going to go on a 1890s rabbit hunt. And we're going to hopefully get some rabbit, and if we do, we're going to do a real special dish for you. At this time in history, there was a lot of Italian immigration coming into America. And while the majority of these people went to places like New York City, Chicago, a lot of the urban areas, a large portion of them settled in the Midwest and in Appalachia. And so there's a lot of Italian cooking that comes in along with the Appalachian area and that region, the flavors that begin to intermix. So we're going to hopefully get to talk a little bit about that. It all depends on whether or not we get some rabbits in the morning. Let's take a look at some of the clothing and accoutrements that someone might wear or carry in the 1890s going on a rabbit hunt. So what I've got today is I'm wearing a Norfolk jacket and 8-panel cap that are made from a pattern from 1897. The vest that I'm wearing is also 1897. You can kind of see it poking out here a little bit. This is my calling horn that you might have seen my most recent video before this one, where we made this sounding horn for hunting. This is in case I need to make contact with part of the hunting party. I'll probably actually be hunting alone tomorrow, but I like to have this just in case I need to call or find out where somebody is. I'm wearing trousers that these came from Bronson & Co. I think they call them old-time trousers. They're actually very right for this period, and they've got a nice thick cotton. It's pretty heavy, so it holds up well to this kind of work, and is a little bit warmer than some of the thinner stuff that I've got. Well, I've got this belt. This is my cartridge belt, and it's got cartridges for my shotgun. I'm using a double-barreled 1890s shotgun. This is an original shotgun, and we've done a video on this as well. You can look up where we talk about this in more detail. This is Damascus wire twist shotgun, so we only shoot black powder out of it. I have made up black powder cartridges in brass shells, and that's what I use to shoot. This belt was made by my good friend Brian Cushing. I don't know if he's looking to get in the business or not, but this is a very fine belt. So we'll take the Norfolk jacket off so you can get a better view of the waistcoat here, the vest. Typical of the 1890s look, late period, late 19th century look. I've got a wool silk neckerchief. This one didn't come from South Union Mills, but South Union Mills does carry some that are very similar and very appropriate for this period. So if you're looking for something along these lines, that's a good place I can recommend. And we'll put a link in the description on all of this so you can find this stuff. So underneath of the vest, I'm wearing the wool 1873 military shirt. This is a wool flannel shirt. This is available from What Price Glory. And then on my feet, I'm wearing my 1890s to 1950s leather Larigan moccasins. These are available from Logston & Co., as are the hats. So that's my outfit. That's what I'm going to carry. This is what I'm going to use to hopefully get some rabbits in the morning.
The morning of the hunt dawned crisp and bright. You can hunt in the morning or in the evening. Right at dawn or dusk is the best time to find rabbits. I like hunting in the morning because then I have the rest of the day to process the animal and I don't have to worry about working in the dark. Now I swapped out the 8-panel cap for a blaze orange wool Stormy Cromer because I wanted to stay within Indiana hunting regulations. A lot of people hunt rabbits with dogs, and it's certainly a lot easier to hunt with dogs, but since we didn't have any dogs to work with, and we're trying to show a lower end impression, we opted not to hunt with dogs. So the point with rabbit hunting without a dog is you have to be very observant, very quiet, and be able to rustle the bushes every now and then to try to flush something out. It's kind of a cross between squirrel hunting and bird hunting. Hunting like this was a way of bridging the divide between the upper classes and lower classes. Everyone enjoyed hunting, and it was becoming a great sport by the 1890s. Throughout the 19th century, sport hunting came into being. So somebody who was poor could go out and hunt, disguising it as sport, and actually provide food for their families.
Buongiorno. So I've skinned and gutted the rabbit. We're ready to start with the cooking process now. And it was good to kind of get an idea of how I hit him and everything. I went to wash some of this hair off of there. But it was clearly a chest shot. Saved the hindquarters, just a few pieces of shot in the hindquarters. So that's pretty good. That's what you want. As much in the head as possible and as little left behind as possible. So we'll get him cleaned up, and Josh is going to start cooking this thing. So it was a good clean shot. It was a lot of vital organs were damaged. This rabbit did not know what hit it. So that's what we want for quality hunting, responsible hunting. That's how it's done. So Josh, tell us what you're going to be cooking for us today.
Well, today we're going to be cooking hunter's rabbit. Now in Italian that would be Coniglio alla Cacciatora. Here in America we tend to think about that as cacciatori, and quite often you hear about chicken cacciatori. Here in America and in Italy, rabbits were often looked down on as peasant food. And so as people stopped hunting them so much, that recipe transitioned over to chicken. And so we see chicken cacciatori on menus a lot now, but the original recipe was for rabbit.
Mm-hmm. Because rabbit's a poor food. It's not something that you would normally put on a fancy table, right?
Right. And we've got cookbooks, both from America and Italy, that say things like rabbits aren't regarded as good, proper, presentable food. Mm-hmm. So the cookbook that we're going to be cooking out of today is The Science in the Kitchen and the Art of Eating Well by Pellegrino Artusi.
Okay.
He wrote this cookbook in 1891.
Okay, so right into our time period.
Very much in our time period. And in here he's got recipes for chicken cacciatori, chicken pollo alla cacciatora, he would say. He's got recipes in here for rabbit, various ways. So we are going to sort of mix one of his rabbit recipes and one of his chicken cacciatora recipe together to give us sort of a very authentic flavor.
But this is something that would have been cooked in American homes of Italian descent or Italian immigrant homes in the 1890s.
Exactly, yes.
Especially in rural areas where rabbit was readily available.
Exactly, yes. This dish, for me, of course, everybody, we've all eaten spaghetti. We all know spaghetti. But a friend of mine cooked this recipe for me. And this was the first Italian recipe that wasn't just plain spaghetti that I learned how to make.
Okay.
Now, over the last 100 years, 120 years, the recipe has really changed. Everybody's got their own take on it. But the recipe we're doing today is going to be very close to the 19th and early 20th century version of this dish.
Great. And of course, Italian food especially is one of your passions, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is combining your interest in the 19th century as well as your interest in Italian food and Italian culture, correct?
Yes, yes, very much.
Fantastic.
Italian food was the first type of food that I really learned how to cook. Before I got into 19th century American food, before I started looking at like the Californio, the Hispanic Southwest sort of dishes that I've been cooking for some of our cowboy camps, Italian food was what really got me started.
Great. Well, let's get on with it.
Sounds good. I'm just going to splay them open here. Go ahead and do our quarters. So as I'm doing our quarters, any shot that I want to run across, I can just flick that out with the tip of the knife. It's something you always want to be on the lookout with wild game. I'm just going to cut our quarter here. Another trick to processing meat is you don't necessarily want to saw through it with your knife. Just when you're cutting, press down. So what happens is as I'm cutting through that, I'm wearing out more of the edge, and especially as I go through that and hit the wood of the cutting board, I'm going to be dulling my knife down faster. So I'm going to press down and then move the meat back and forth across it. So I'm kind of holding my knife steadier. It'll save the edge of my cutting board a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do, we've taken our pan, we've put a couple tablespoons of olive oil in there, and we've put a sprig of rosemary. I've got some coals going on this side underneath our grate. We're just going to let this heat up. We don't want this to heat up fast. We don't want this to get super hot. We just want to bring the flavors out of this rosemary and into the oil. So we're going to let this sit here for just a few minutes and do its thing. So I've taken the lid off of our pan. We're getting just a little bit of a sizzle here. I'm going to move our rosemary around a little bit, turn it over. And now after I quartered our rabbit and did some of the butchering on it, I've salted and peppered our meat. And we are just going to put this right down into our oil. We're just going to braise our meat. We want to get just a good color. On the bottom side, we're going to flip it. I'm going to put the lid back on here for just a minute. We'll just flip that over. Here we've got a can of tomato puree. In Italy, families would pick the tomatoes and they would bottle them themselves, what they call passata. This can is just a can of tomato puree. In the 1850s, canned food started to take off. By the Civil War era, it was really coming into its own. And by the time you hit the turn of the century, any type of fruit and vegetable is canned. Canned tomatoes are super popular. So I've picked tomato puree because it's very close to the passata. In Artusi's book, he talks about how to make your own tomato sauce, and it's essentially just salt, tomatoes, and some basil. So that's what we're going to kind of do here today with our Appalachian Cacciatora. So we're going to take the lid off our pan. We've got good color on most of our rabbit that's in there. Our rosemary looks like it's about done its thing. So we're just going to toss it there into the fire. And we're going to take our rabbit out. Now the next thing I want to do, I have finally chopped an onion, a white onion. I'm going to put about 1/4 of an onion in there. And again, we don't want this fire super hot. We want to keep it kind of over here over these low coals. So we've got about 1/4 of our onion in there. We're just going to stir this around for a little bit. It's going to get a little translucent, just enough to get those onion juices into that olive oil and give it a little flavor. We're going to put our lid back on, keep the heat in, and let those cook a little bit. So our onions, they're looking pretty good. What we're going to do, now we do have a little bit of rabbit meat on the bottom of our pot here. Got our onions. We want to slow those down a little bit, so we're going to just pour probably about 1/2 cup of red wine in there and stir this around. Scrape anything up off the bottom. It's going to be good flavor for our sauce. And we're just going to let that wine simmer until it's about halfway gone. That will evaporate our alcohol out of it, but it's still going to leave us with that good wine flavor. In goes our can of tomatoes. We'll rinse that out. Rinse our can out. We're going to give this a good stir. Get that mixed real well. Now that we've gotten this stirred real well, if we were using homemade passata, one of the ingredients you typically find in that is basil leaves. So we're just going to take some basil leaves and tear these up. We don't want to chop them. We'll lose a lot of our flavor on the cutting board. So we just take a handful of these, tear these, break them up and put them in the sauce. One of the things about doing tomato-based foods in cast iron, there is some acid in the tomatoes. So we want to make sure after we cook this that we get our pan cleaned out real well. We don't want to let that tomato sit in there any longer than necessary. We're just going to give that a stir. The basil will give this a nice sweetness. And now we are going to put our rabbit back in here, and we're going to let this simmer. We don't want this to be a fast boil. We want this to be a simmer, and we want to simmer it for probably 30-45 minutes. Definitely 45 minutes to an hour is probably about best. Now we're just going to pour that back in there. Give it a good stir to make sure everything is submerged. This rabbit is going to slow simmer in this sauce. We're going to really soften that gamey rabbit up. We're going to impart some of that good meat flavor into our sauce. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the fire. I'm going to move these logs over just a little bit. See, we're getting these fast bubbles right through here. This side of the fire is now getting really hot, so I just want to adjust my heat. I'm going to put that lid back on there. I'm going to go get the shovel and I'm going to adjust that just a little bit. So I've got these handy log tongs here. These were made by blacksmith Mick Kane, who's here in Indiana. You can find a link or some information to these in the description I think Nathan's going to put up. You just reach in there, grab that log, move it around where we need it. Move our coals around a little bit with them. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, rotate our skillet around. I want to keep heat going evenly on our pan as we check this. So we've got our fire mostly here now. This part of the pan was getting hotter, so I've moved it over here closer to where the coals aren't. Trying to keep it rotating, but I want to make sure that I don't get my handle over top of these coals and get it so hot that I can't handle my pan. Traditionally, to go with cacciatora, either chicken or rabbit, you would serve risotto, rice, or polenta, which is like a type of cornmeal mush. Since we're going to put our Appalachian spin on it, we're going to use corn grits. Corn grits are made from hominy, which is a type of white corn. And it's important to remember when you're doing grits, the ratio is 3-to-1. However you want to measure it, it's 1 part grits to 3 part water. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this cup, and this is a good amount for 2 or 3 people here, kind of your average size coffee cup, and I filled it not quite up to the top, about a 1/2 inch down from the top. I'm just going to set that here in this bowl, set that aside, take the lid off of our pot, and now we're going to get 3 of these full of water. I don't know what the temperature is out here today. It's not very warm, so it might take a little bit for this to get going on our fire. So we've got our 3 cups of water in there, and now I'm going to grab just a little bit of salt, and I'm going to put, that's about a teaspoon of salt we're going to put in there. We'll take our lid, set it on top, and now this is going to go on the fire to start boiling. Once this starts boiling, we're going to dump our bowl full of grits into here to cook. So our pot has been simmering for right at an hour. There have been times that I've checked on it. I want to resist checking on it a lot. I kind of give it about 10 minutes. I want to make sure that I rotate it around to keep it evenly heated. There was a time it got a little bit warm, so I set it up here on the ring to cool down, not stop cooking entirely. The wood that we're cooking with today is beech, so it burns hot, burns into coals quick, and these coals are lasting a while. We've got a good fire going. We've just set our water here to start boiling for our grits, And we're going to go ahead and take the lid off.
That looks great.
Give this another stir. Now Nathan, I want you to go ahead and take a taste here.
Okay.
And tell me what you think about our sauce.
I can do this without burning myself real bad. Definitely can taste strong tomato on the front. You can taste the rabbit. You can taste the meat of the rabbit in there. Kind of a little bit of a gamey, not an unpleasant gamey, but it's definitely doesn't taste like beef or chicken. There's definitely the basil. I think you could probably use just a little bit more salt.
Okay. Now that's good to note. When we put the meat in, we salted and peppered the meat, and that put a little bit of that into that oil initially. But because these tomatoes have water in them, that water is going to cook out. So if we salt that at the beginning to a level that we think tastes good, as that water leaves, it changes our salt ratio. It'll make our salt too much by the time this is finished cooking.
Okay.
So if you think that it needs salt, then it sounds like we're right on where we need to be with it. We're simmering just a little faster than I cared to be because I added coals to get our water going over here. So as I'm heating up our water, our pan is going to get hotter than it needs to be. So I'm going to actually pick it up, set it over here off to the side on the ring, and I'm going to tilt the lid like this so that we'll let some of that steam, some of that water cook off to help thicken our sauce up. And by the time that we get our grits done, this should have simmered to the right amount. The sauce should be thick, the meat should be tender, everything should be ready. So I've moved our rabbit and our sauce back over here on the fire. Got it back a little closer to the flame. I'm trying to keep it at that slow simmer. Our water, we're at a good rolling boil now for our grits. So I'm just going to set our lid aside. I'm just going to add these slowly. Do about a quarter to a third. Give a good stir. Sometimes they'll want to clump up on you if you dump that whole bowl in at once. We want to stir these pretty frequently. Make sure nothing's sticking, nothing's clumping. We also want to keep stirring our sauce. This is going to thicken up because we've got the fire going under here. This pan's still going to be fairly warm. It's going to be good to help tenderize our rabbit. The acid in the tomato is going to help tenderize it, as well as this sort of simmering process. And we are just going to let this all cook until it's done. Our cacciatora is done. You can see the steam coming off of our grits. They are good and thick. They've plopped up. So it is now time to go ahead and plate our meal up. So we've got our sauce thickened up. We've plated up our cacciatora. We've got our rabbit over here. We've got our grits. We've dressed it with some sauce. Now, normally we would have some sort of good hard cheese, a good Parmigiano, a good Pecorino or something that we would grate and put over that. Here at camp, we didn't think to grab any cheese, but we've got these staples that we brought with us. And so this is our dinner. We're gonna... So here we've got our cacciatora plated up. We added a little bit of extra salt to both the grits and the sauce before we put it on the platter. And now, what do you think, Nathan?
Well, let's give it a try. I really wasn't sure about grits with Italian sauce, but that's actually quite good. The rabbit looks like it's tender.
Try a piece of that. Get some of those grits on there. Oh man. That's really good.
Thank you.
I only have one complaint.
Okay.
There's a hair in my food.
Everybody's a critic.
If you guys have enjoyed this, please give us a like and subscribe. Be sure to check out Josh's Instagram. He posts a lot of cool historic food related stuff on there. I'll put a link in the description. You guys have a great time. We'll see you down the road.